Elias walked home slowly that night, his steps heavy after a long, exhausting shift at the factory, his thoughts filled with nothing but the promise of rest and maybe a warm meal. The streets were quiet, the kind of quiet that made the whole world feel paused, like even the wind was tired. He passed the old railway bridge, a place most people avoided because it looked abandoned and eerie, but Elias took it every day because it cut 10 minutes off his walk. The moonlight slipped through the broken planks above him, forming thin silver lines on the ground. As he moved forward, something in the darkness flickered, not like a lamp or a car or anything familiar, but like a tiny piece of air twisting, bending, and shimmering. Elias stopped. At first, he thought he was simply overtired, maybe imagining things. But then the shimmer moved again, this time pulling itself into shape. A small figure stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. Elias' heart thumped loudly as he instinctively stepped back. The figure was small, very small, like the size of a child, but not shaped exactly like one. Thin limbs trembling gently. Skin that wasn't skin at all, but something smooth and faintly silver, almost like it reflected the moon. And eyes, large, glowing, faintly blue, filled with fear so real that Elias felt it before even understanding it. He swallowed hard but did not run, though every instinct in him screamed to run fast and far. The little creature looked at him, eyes shaking, breath unsteady, as if expecting harm. Elias raised his hands slowly to show he meant no danger. He whispered, "It's okay, I'm not going to hurt you," though he doubted the creature understood. It took a shaky step forward and then stopped, holding its stomach with tiny hands. That's when Elias understood. The child was hungry, desperately, painfully hungry. Her body trembled with every breath. Her thin chest rose and felt like she was struggling not to collapse. She didn't speak, but a weak sound escaped her throat, a soft cry that pierced straight through Elias' heart. He looked at the half-eaten chicken sandwich in his lunch box, the only food he had left for the night. He hesitated for half a second, not because he didn't want to share, but because he wasn't sure if the child could even eat human food. But then he glanced at her hollow eyes again, and hesitation vanished. He slowly unwrapped the sandwich and held it out. The alien child flinched backward at first, as if expecting something dangerous, but then the smell of food reached her. She sniffed the air with quick, nervous breaths. Her eyes widened with desperate longing. Slowly, shaking all the while, she reached out with thin fingers and took the sandwich. She didn't eat it like a normal child would. She devoured it. Torn bites, trembling jaws, quick swallows, like someone who hadn't eaten in days or maybe even longer. Elias felt a strange ache in his chest watching her. He didn't know who she was, where she had come from, or why she was here, but he understood one thing deeply. No child in the universe deserved to be alone and starving. When the sandwich was gone, she looked up at him with wet eyes, her breathing slightly steadier now. She tapped her fingers lightly on her chest, then on his, as if trying to communicate. A soft glow passed from her fingertips, gentle like the warmth of a candle. Elias gasped, not from fear, but from surprise. It felt like a silent thank you, like the child was sharing a piece of her gratitude directly into his heart. He knelt slowly so he wasn't towering over her. She didn't run, she didn't hide. Instead, she stepped closer and pressed her forehead lightly against his arm, a gesture so innocent and trusting that Elias felt his throat tighten. She was scared, alone, and lost. She kept looking at the sky through the cracks of the bridge, then back at him, her lips trembling every time she tried to speak. He didn't understand her words, but he understood her fear. And in that lonely, silent night, he made a quiet decision, one that would change everything. He wasn't going to leave her. Not here. Not like this. Not ever. Elias stayed kneeling on the cold ground, feeling the quiet night press around him like a heavy blanket, his eyes never leaving the small alien girl who clung to him with fragile, trembling strength. She was still trembling, but now not just from hunger. Fear lingered in every sharp breath she took, in the way her wide, glowing eyes darted around, scanning every shadow as if she expected danger to leap out from it at any moment. He noticed her clothes, thin and tattered, barely covering her small frame, and the faint bruises on her arms, the tiny scratches along her legs, and a sudden pang of sorrow hit him. Whoever, or whatever, had caused her pain had vanished, leaving only her in the darkness, and Elias felt an urgent, almost desperate need to protect her, even though he had no idea how. Carefully, he unwrapped his own jacket and gently draped it around her shoulders. The jacket was too big, swallowing her tiny frame almost entirely, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she shivered once and then leaned slightly into him, her small body seeking warmth and safety in a way that made Elia's chest tighten with a strange mixture of fear and tenderness. He tried speaking softly, but the words felt inadequate. "It's okay, you're safe now. I won't let anything hurt you." He wasn't sure if she understood language, but her gaze lingered on his eyes in a way that suggested understanding more than words could ever express. Then, with slow, deliberate hesitation, she lifted one glowing hand and pressed it against his chest, right where his heart beat. A soft, pulsing warmth radiated from her touch, and Elias felt a strange wave of connection pass through him, something unexplainable yet comforting, like a spark of trust had ignited between them. It was as if she was telling him silently, without words, "I know you are kind. I know you care." He swallowed hard, feeling his own heart respond, and for a long moment they just remained like that, human and alien, bound by fear, trust, and a fragile sense of hope. As the minutes passed, he noticed her glancing repeatedly over her shoulder, eyes wide, and realized that she was still scared, not of him, but of something else lurking beyond the bridge, something she had clearly fled from. Elias understood that her trust in him was extraordinary. It was not something she had given lightly. He could feel her tension slowly easing, yet her readiness to flee was always there, a trembling thread just beneath the surface. Carefully, he extended a hand, and she hesitated, then placed her small, glowing fingers in his rough palm. Her skin was cold, but her grip was surprisingly strong, almost desperate, and Elias felt the bond deepen. She wanted to know he would not leave her. He wanted to know he could keep her safe, even though the world, or worlds, around them felt suddenly enormous and threatening. She raised her eyes to the sky again, and Elias followed her gaze, seeing only the faint shimmer of stars behind the drifting clouds. He tried to imagine what she must be feeling, homesick, scared, and alone in a strange world. And yet, even in her terror, there was a spark of something remarkable, a kind of courage that made his chest swell with admiration. Then, almost without warning, she tilted her head and touched her forehead lightly to his arm, as if sealing an unspoken promise. She trusted him, and he would not betray that trust. Elias whispered again, "I'll take care of you. I won't let anything happen." The night seemed to listen, holding its breath as the two of them remained together, human and alien, small and fragile, yet somehow connected in a bond far stronger than the darkness around them. He didn't know what dangers awaited them, but for now, that was enough. She was here. She was alive. And for the first time since he had seen her, Elias allowed himself to imagine that maybe, just maybe, they could face whatever came next together. As allies, as protectors, as friends who didn't need words to understand the strength growing silently between them in the quiet night. Elias had barely started to feel a fragile sense of calm when the night shattered with a sound unlike anything he had ever heard. A roar that seemed to come from the sky itself, rolling over the town in waves, shaking the ground beneath his feet, rattling the empty buildings around the railway bridge. The alien girl froze instantly, her glowing eyes wide with terror, and she grabbed his hand with a grip that made him flinch. Her small fingers were tight around his, almost painfully so, as if she knew that without him, she would be helpless against whatever was coming. Elias looked up, squinting against the dark clouds now swirling unnaturally above them, and then he saw it. A blinding light streaking through the sky, not like a plane or a star, but like the heavens themselves were cracking open. It moved with impossible speed, coming closer with a silent power that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. The girl trembled against him, pressing her forehead to his chest, and for a moment Elias felt like time had slowed, the world narrowing down to just the two of them and the blinding terror above. Then the light crashed, a massive, silent impact that sent a wave of energy across the field, making the air vibrate, the ground shudder, and the small trees around the bridge bend as though bowing to a force far greater than anything on Earth. Elias dropped to his knees instinctively, pulling the alien girl close, covering her with his arms as debris rustled and the night pulsed with energy. Her breathing was rapid, shallow, and he could feel her small chest pressing against his, her fear almost tangible. He whispered, "It's okay, I've got you," though the words seemed powerless against the overwhelming spectacle above them. From the smoke and brilliant light, a figure began to emerge, and Elias froze, his mouth dry. It was enormous, towering above the broken trees, radiating power that made the air itself hum. Its body glimmered with light and metal-like armor that shifted as if alive, edges glowing with colors that no human eyes had names for. The alien girl gasped and instinctively dug her nails into his arm, clutching him like a lifeline, and Elias realized she wasn't hiding from him. She was running from it, this colossal presence, yet somehow drawn to it as if hope and fear collided in her heart. The figure moved closer, and the moonlight, or whatever light existed around it, caught the outline of a face impossibly beautiful and terrifying, regal yet terrifyingly strong. Elias felt the pressure of its gaze even before it spoke or made a sound. The air felt heavier, charged with something ancient and alive. The girl's small fingers dug into his shirt, her head tucked against his shoulder, trembling like a fragile leaf in a storm. Elias wanted to run, wanted to hide, but something inside him held him firm. He could not abandon her, not now, not when the danger was real and clear. The light around the figure pulsed, bathing them in an ethereal glow, and for a moment Elias thought the world itself might bend or break under the power radiating from it. Yet, despite the fear clawing at his chest, he noticed the girl's eyes lock on the figure with a mixture of recognition and desperate hope. She whispered a soft sound, no words he could understand, but Elias felt the meaning clearly. "Mother, please." The figure paused, a hand raised in the air as if to strike, but the girl stepped slightly forward, tiny and trembling, standing between Elias and the overwhelming presence. Elias' heart leapt. He realized she trusted him enough to hide behind him, yet loved enough to seek her mother at the same time. Then the figure moved closer still, the ground vibrating with each step, light spiraling like wind around them, and Elias could feel the raw power pressing against his chest like a storm threatening to tear him apart. The girl cried out, a mixture of fear and relief, and Elias held her, whispering again, "I'm here, I'm not going anywhere." The light around the enormous figure seemed to settle, softening just slightly as the child ran into its arms. Her small frame engulfed, trembling, sobbing, and Elias watched, awestruck and terrified, as the impossible reality unfolded. He had no idea what they were, no idea what power this being held, and yet he understood one unshakable truth. Somehow he had stepped into something far bigger than himself, and the choice he had made, to help a starving child, was now placing him at the heart of a cosmic storm that had only just begun. The alien girl pressed her small body against her mother, whispering again, her glowing fingers brushing against Elias' arm in a silent, heartfelt thank you that made his chest ache with emotion. The night seemed alive, charged with forces beyond imagination, yet in that terrifying moment, a fragile bond between human and alien held strong, a bond born of compassion, trust, and courage that no cosmic storm could erase. Elias realized with both fear and awe that his story, was about to change forever. The figure descended from the blinding light with a presence that made the world itself feel smaller, as if the night and the stars were bending to her will. Elias couldn't take his eyes off her, though every instinct screamed at him to flee. She was impossibly tall, her body graceful yet radiating raw power, like the universe had molded her from storms and light. Her armor shimmered in colors that shifted with her every movement, liquid and alive, humming softly as if it contained the pulse of countless stars. Elias could feel the air itself thickening, vibrating with energy that pressed against his chest and made each breath a conscious effort. The alien girl clutched his arm tightly, her tiny body trembling violently, and yet she took a step forward, ignoring the fear that Elias saw reflected in her glowing eyes. Elias realized she was running to her mother, and in that realization he understood the depth of their bond, the fierce, protective love that spanned even worlds. The colossal woman stopped and slowly knelt, her long limbs folding with surprising grace so that her eyes were level with her daughter. The glowing child threw herself into her mother's arms, sobbing, shaking, and hugging her as though she would never let go. Elias watched helplessly as the mother's immense hands carefully checked her daughter's tiny frame, her touch gentle despite the power that radiated from her like a living storm. She whispered softly, words Elias could not understand, but her tone was unmistakable, filled with relief, love, and worry so profound that even a human could feel it in his chest. Elias' heart ached with emotion. Then the mother's head lifted slowly, and her eyes, bright as supernovas, endless and piercing, locked onto him. Elias felt his stomach tighten as if the weight of her gaze could crush him. Every instinct he had screamed run, yet his feet stayed rooted to the ground. She took a single step toward him, and the ground seemed to respond, quivering beneath her immense presence. He could feel the force of her aura, the raw energy she carried, the centuries of power, the sheer authority that demanded respect and attention. Elias' heart pounded, yet he could not look away. And then the child, sensing his terror, pressed herself against him, wrapping her small arms around his waist in a protective gesture that was both endearing and heartbreaking. The mother stopped, her glowing eyes softening as they flickered between her child and him. Elias realized with both awe and fear that he was being judged, not for what he had done in a grand sense, but for the simple act of protecting her child when no one else would. Time seemed to stretch. The air vibrated. Elias felt that a single thought from her could obliterate him, and yet here he was, trembling but alive. The child whispered again, a small, melodic sound, her glowing fingers brushing against his chest in silent appeal. The mother's expression shifted slightly, like a storm breaking into gentle rain, and she studied him with an intensity that both terrified and humbled him. Elias' mind raced. He had no idea what language she spoke, what customs or rules bound her species, or even how to explain why he had acted the way he did. And yet, as he met her gaze, he sensed that she understood something universal, something that transcended words: compassion. The colossal mother exhaled slowly, and the energy that had seemed poised to crush him softened just a fraction. Her towering figure loomed above him, radiant and almost unreal, but her arms remained around her daughter, holding her close. Elias felt tears prick at his eyes, tears of fear, relief, and a strange, profound awe. In that moment he realized that his simple choice, to feed a child, to offer warmth and protection, had reached across worlds, drawing the attention of a being whose power could have ended him in an instant. Yet she had chosen instead to study him, to see the heart behind his actions, and Elias' chest swelled with an unfamiliar pride, a feeling that somehow he had earned her respect in the most human way possible. The child rested her glowing head against his arm once more, and Elias whispered softly, "It's okay, we're safe." The mother's gaze lingered on him for one last heartbeat, a silent acknowledgement passing between them that spoke of understanding, gratitude, and an unspoken promise. Elias knew the night would never be the same again, that the memory of her presence, her power, and the raw beauty of a mother protecting her child would live inside him forever. And though the wind and stars swirled around them, carrying with them the scent of alien worlds and distant storms, Elias felt an unshakable truth settle in his heart. Some acts of kindness, no matter how small, can touch the mightiest of beings, and some bonds, once forged, can never be broken. The towering mother stood with her glowing child clutched close, the light from her form casting long, shifting shadows across the broken field, and Elias could feel the weight of her presence pressing against him like the gravity of a small planet. The alien girl whispered something again, her small voice trembling yet full of emotion, and her glowing fingers brushed against Elias' arm once more as if to say, "Please, trust me." He nodded slightly, though he barely dared to breathe, because he knew that whatever came next could decide his fate, and he had no idea what she was capable of. Then slowly the mother raised one impossibly long, elegant arm, and a sphere of pure, shimmering energy formed in her palm. It crackled and pulsed with raw power, spinning like a tiny star, radiating heat and light that Elias could feel even through the distance. The ground beneath them vibrated, small rocks skittered across the dirt, and the air hummed with a force that made his teeth ache. The alien child gasped and buried her head into Elias' chest, her tiny arms tightening around him in fear, but she didn't let go, her small body shaking yet protective, as if she were shielding him from what she knew could happen. Elias' heart pounded violently, but he stayed rooted in place, feeling the pull of something far beyond human understanding. He tried to make himself small, to be humble, to show that he meant no harm. The mother's glowing eyes bore into him, and he thought he could see the threads of thought, the assessment of a being whose judgment carried the weight of worlds. She could obliterate him with a flick of her hand, yet she hesitated. The alien girl whimpered softly, pressing closer, and Elias felt a surge of protectiveness he had never known before. "I'm here," he whispered, almost desperately. "I won't let her hurt you." "I only wanted to help." The child's voice rose slightly faint but insistent, a single word that repeated through her glow. "Human helped." The mother froze mid-motion. The sphere in her hand stopped spinning, the crackling energy fading slightly as her eyes, impossibly bright and infinite, studied Elias. She lowered her hand slowly, and the pressure in the air shifted, almost like a storm subsiding, leaving only the calm after immense power had passed. Elias dared a small breath and realized that he was still alive, that her judgment had been passed, and that the tiny act of kindness, feeding her child, protecting her, had spoken louder than words or gestures of diplomacy ever could. Then, as if sensing his awe and fear, the mother extended her hand toward him again, this time without threat, her glowing fingers hovering just inches from his chest. Elias felt a pulse of warmth, soft but unmistakably powerful, spreading through him, making his heart beat in sync with something larger, something beyond human measure. Suddenly, visions filled his mind. Flashes of the child being chased through distant landscapes, the terror of a damaged ship, the mother searching through storms of energy, the vast emptiness of space, the enemies hunting them across planets. He gasped, overwhelmed by the intensity, but the child pressed against him, grounding him, her warmth reminding him why he had acted in the first place. The mother's voice, deep and melodic like distant thunder, resonated in his ears, though he could not understand the words. The meaning, however, was clear. "You saved my child. Your heart is pure. No debt is greater." Elias felt tears sting his eyes. He had only fed a hungry child, held her when she trembled, and yet the consequences of that simple act had reached a mother whose power could have destroyed him instantly. The alien girl's glowing fingers lingered against him one last time before she stepped fully into her mother's arms, whispering words of gratitude, hope, and love that Elias could not comprehend but somehow understood with every fiber of his being. The mother lowered her gaze one final time on him, her immense presence softened into something almost reverent. She did not speak in human words, but the weight of her acknowledgement was unmistakable. Elias had passed a test not of strength, but of character, a test that reached across the stars. And in that moment, as the air settled and the hum of her power dimmed to a gentle glow, Elias understood something profound. In a universe vast and filled with beings stronger than imagination, compassion, courage, and a willingness to help even the smallest, weakest life could be the greatest power of all. The mother's towering form seemed to hum with the quiet aftershock of her own immense power. The glowing child nestled safely in her arms, and Elias could feel the air around them thick with something almost sacred, a presence that demanded reverence yet offered a strange warmth that made his chest ache with emotion. The alien girl looked up at him with eyes glowing softly, her small fingers brushing against his arm once more, a silent thank you that carried more weight than words could ever hold. Then with deliberate grace, the mother stepped closer, each movement fluid, controlled, yet overwhelming in its sheer magnitude, and Elias instinctively took a step back, heart pounding. But the child pressed herself against him, tiny arms wrapping around his waist as if to anchor him, to show that he was still part of this strange, extraordinary moment. The mother raised her palm, not threatening this time, but over his chest, directly where the child's fingers had touched him before. A warm pulse flowed from her hand into him, gentle at first, then stronger, filling him with a sensation he could barely describe. Warmth, strength, a surge of life, as if she were weaving a piece of her power into him, a gift, a blessing, or perhaps a promise. Elias' mind reeled as flashes of images invaded his thoughts. Distant worlds of glowing cities, swirling storms of color, that description, civilizations older than the earth, yet all filled with beings capable of feeling, caring, and protecting each other. He gasped as he realized that he could feel strength now within him, something beyond his human limits, something extraordinary yet completely safe. The child looked up at him, her small face lighting with joy, tears shining faintly in the corner of her eyes, and Elias felt his own tears threaten to fall. She whispered a single word, soft and glowing, that he somehow understood in the deepest part of his heart: friend. The mother's eyes lingered on him, her infinite gaze almost touching the core of his soul, and in that gaze was something that Elias could not have imagined: respect, gratitude, and an acknowledgement that his small, human act of kindness had reached across galaxies. He had not saved a planet, fought a war, or demonstrated strength in battle. He had merely helped a child, fed her, offered warmth, and protected her in a moment of need, and that had been enough to earn the respect of a being whose power dwarfed comprehension. The air seemed to vibrate with quiet energy as the mother and child joined hands, the child's small fingers entwined with the glowing strands of her mother's light, and Elias felt a pulse through him, as though a living thread connected them all, human and alien, across worlds, across species. The mother lowered her head slightly, almost bowing in a gesture of honor that transcended human gestures, and whispered something to her daughter, her voice deep, melodic, filled with pride and relief. The child squeezed Elias once more, glowing softly, and stepped fully into her mother's arms, safe, whole, and loved. Elias could feel the warmth in his chest, a lingering pulse from the mother's gift, a constant reminder that kindness had power far beyond what humans often imagined. The sky seemed to shimmer, the stars brighter for a fleeting moment, as if acknowledging the act that had connected them. Then, in a gentle burst of radiant light, the mother lifted her daughter, preparing to return to the world from which they had come. The girl turned, her glowing eyes meeting his one last time, and whispered friend again, a promise that transcended the distance between worlds. The mother's towering figure, majestic and formidable, shimmered one final time before she and her daughter vanished into the cosmos, leaving Elias standing alone, trembling, yet filled with a profound sense of awe and wonder. He looked down at his chest and saw a faint, glowing mark, pulsing gently, alive with warmth and energy, a permanent reminder of the connection he had forged, the gift he had received, and the worlds that now remembered the human who had helped a small, hungry child. Elias took a deep, shaky breath, feeling the night differently, the world around him larger and more alive, and he understood in his heart a truth so simple, yet so extraordinary, that even the smallest acts of compassion could reach across the universe, touch the mightiest beings, and leave a mark, both in the stars and in the heart of one human who had dared to care.